welcome to Tiger Sidelines right here on MC22, the Zoom edition, Season 7, Episode 2. The Missouri Tigers lose their opener. They play against the number 2 team in the country, Alabama. Alabama looks like they'll be one of the playoff teams. They look that good, and Alabama wins it 38-19. Joining me, as always, Dave Matter and Gabe DeArmond, and I'll start with you, Dave. Dave, your impressions of the 38-19 loss. There were some good things, there were some rusty things, but overall, I think a lot of people thought this game would be, especially outcome-wise, would be worse than it actually was.
Yeah, I think the final score is not really as indicative of what probably 2.5 quarters of that game really was. It really took a while for Missouri to get going on both sides of the ball. I didn't think the defense really played poorly. They gave up a lot of third downs. I thought they tackled well. They got a turnover. They didn't get a whole lot of pressure on the quarterback, not much at all really, until late in the game. And that's about what I expected from that defense. Offensively, it just took Missouri way too long to get going. They did some good things. They certainly did. I thought Larry Roundtree ran the ball well. Sean Robinson was pretty accurate on the night, but they just had some critical mistakes at bad moments. Couldn't punch it in the red zone. And by the time they did score, I mean, let's face it, Alabama was kind of checked out at that point, and rightfully so, the way the scoreboard looked.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Sean Robinson, 19 of 25, 185 yards and a touchdown, a beautiful touchdown pass and a play designed to Tyler Beatty, 54-yard touchdown. And Gabe, I thought the one thing overall, if you look at things, the thing I noticed obviously was Alabama's speed, especially on defense.
Yeah, look, Alabama's just better at every position. I mean, if you go through Missouri's roster, they've got 2 guys who I think would see significant time at Alabama. That's Nick Bolton and Tyree Gillespie. And other than that, I don't know that they have any. I saw some things scheme-wise that you look at and you say, I like that, right? I mean, jet sweeps and quarterback runs and motion and misdirection, and those are all good things for the future. But none of them were going to work against Alabama. Missouri can't get the edge against Alabama very often. I mean, I saw 2 guys, Jalen Knox and Tyler Beatty, at times showed the speed to play with Alabama. Other than that, they're just faster, you know. So I thought he tried to run his offense, and his offense wasn't going to work against Alabama. But I don't think I'm not nitpicking play calling. I don't think there are many offenses that are going to work against Alabama for Missouri.
I think that there's a lot of teams in the country who are going to, and in the SEC, frankly, who are going to look that way against Alabama, especially, Dave, you know, when you're trying to get stuff going on offense for Missouri with the jet sweeps, the way the linebackers closed for the Crimson Tide was amazing.
Yeah, and against a defense like that, you can't run side to side. And Sean Robinson figured that out pretty quickly, or at least he should have, because it just wasn't working for him. North and south is the only way you can go. And I think that's how Larry Roundtree played. And I know he didn't get a lot of carries, but he was pretty efficient running the ball. So that was a kind of a glimmer of hope there. But you're not going to get anywhere letting those guys chase you from sideline to sideline. And that just wasn't going to work. It would have been nice to see what this offense could look like against a team of mortals, you know, maybe a non-conference opponent or Vanderbilt or South Carolina. But maybe in the long run, this will be good for them, that they had this test right off the bat, that they're going to have 3 tests right off the bat, and they can be better in the long run for that. But reality is we're just in that game especially, we're just not going to see great results, and that had to be the expectation going in.
Yeah, Larry Roundtree ran it 14 times for 67 yards. I liked all the motion. If there was one thing on offense that, well, there's probably 2, Gabe. One, I thought Robinson needed to throw the ball out of bounds a couple of times instead of, taking sacks. And then the other was the 4th and 1. I wanted him to run it north-south instead of east-west.
Yeah, you know, I like the speed option on 4th and 1, 4th and 2 in some cases. Again, maybe not against Alabama. Right. But, you know, and Robinson, he really had 2 very bad plays, right? The fumble on the option pitch, and then the sack where he took like a 20-yard loss. But to give him credit, both of those are mistakes of aggression. I mean, he is trying to make a play. And I think a lot of times Deshaun Watson's the best example, but you see it with other quarterbacks who are quote unquote dual threat guys. They're mobile guys. they always think they can make a play. So those guys sometimes end up getting sacked more than just a stationary in the pocket guy. Like Tom Brady throws the ball away as soon as somebody's close to him because he's like, I know I'm not getting away. Just get rid of it, live to fight another down. Some of these more athletic quarterbacks, and I don't know if this is the case with Sean or not, tend to think I can get out of this. And then when they don't get out of it, they lose 20 yards, so you got to remember too, that's his first game in 2 years. Overall, I thought he exceeded what I expected to see on that night as far as quarterback win.
Hey, Gabe, let's stay on the offensive side. The one guy that you mentioned that I thought stood out was Jalen Knox. Here he comes back, and he had a pretty good night.
Yeah, and he was a kid who, midway through his freshman year, we were talking all SEC freshman team and looked pretty good. And then for whatever the reason, and from what I've heard, it was confidence and just kind of the way that maybe he didn't mesh with the guy in charge for a year and a half as far as the offense goes, the offensive coordinator. He really disappeared. And he didn't do much the second half of his freshman year and didn't do much last year. So maybe a fresh start and a new voice and just kind of a different way of going about things will be good for him because he was Missouri's leading receiver and I thought pretty clearly the best receiver that night.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Defensively, Dave, one of our keys last week was honestly to stay healthy. They lost Jarvis Ware for a little bit, but defensively, there were definitely some very good signs, I thought, for the Tigers.
I thought Tyree Gillespie was really good back at safety. Martez Manuel in his first start at his new position, that strong safety spot, 3.5 tackles for loss. He was making some impact plays. Nick Bolton was Nick Bolton. He had a couple big hits early on, was very involved. Even though that Najee Harris had a decent game, 3 touchdowns, short yardage touchdowns, I still think the linebackers played pretty well. The one area of concern outside of Trey Williams, who did kind of collapse the pocket a few times and got a sack, and Trajan Jeffcoat didn't get a lot of snaps, but he made a few plays. They just didn't get much push from their defensive line at all. You just didn't see those guys in the backfield very much, get much penetration. Mac Jones, I'm not sure Alabama needed to even wash his jersey after the game. I mean, he's a guy who is not like Gabe said. He's more of the Tom Brady type that's not going to run around and make plays with his legs. He didn't have to. He could just stand back there all day and throw. And when you've got 2 of the best wide receivers in the country who can catch anything in their radius, like Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith, that sets up for a really good situation. And that's what they had. I didn't think Missouri's corners, it's not like they got killed back there, but it's just a really, really hard matchup. And when you're not getting much pressure, that's going to be a challenging night for them, especially when your best guy, Jarvis Ware, is knocked out in the first half.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Waddle went for eight catches, 134, 2 touches. Devontae Smith had 8 catches as well for 89 yards. So those guys got theirs. And I think, Gabe, that there's going to be not a lot of teams that get much pressure on Mac Jones. There'll be some, but I mean, the difference in the defensive line for Missouri and the offensive line for Alabama was definitely evident.
Right. And, Nick Bolton put some pressure on early, but that's if you're going to blitz Alabama, you're now asking somebody to cover Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle one-on-one. And look, Jalen Waddle is a flat-out superstar. I mean, he's maybe the best receiver I've seen on that field since the guy he kind of reminded me of, which was Jeremy Maclin. I think they've got some similarities, and that kid is unbelievable. He made a couple plays in perfect coverage, really. So, again, just we're going to learn more about Missouri on Saturday than we learned last Saturday. What we learned last week was they're not in the same league as Alabama. I mean, I didn't need a game to tell me that. I knew that at 6:01 on Saturday night.
Yeah, we knew that, and that was going to be my next place to go. Dave, I mean, a better test on Saturday in Knoxville against Tennessee. Tennessee's, they've gotten better, and so it'll be a good test. They went on the road and won, but this is more of a matchup for Missouri, and I don't think they're obviously not favored, but I don't think that they'll be many people surprised if Missouri plays a much better game, much closer game, and maybe even comes up with an upset.
It's possible. I mean, I still don't think we know as much about Missouri as we probably do Tennessee, because Tennessee last year, I mean, they're on a 7-game winning streak if you go back to last year. And what did they do? They were pretty good at just beating the bad teams. And sometimes that's all you have to do to have a decent record and go to an okay bowl game. Last year when they played Missouri, remember when, they threw for like 415 yards. They just shredded Missouri's defense. They still only won that game 24-20. So they just do enough things right to beat bad teams. Their game against South Carolina, it was on the road, granted, although home road doesn't really make as much of a difference this year with reduced crowds. But they did just enough to win that game by, I think, a field goal, or it might have been by 4. So they're in a better place right now than Missouri, obviously, because they're winning more games. And going back to last year, they turned around their season. But they're not head and shoulders above Missouri. They're not Florida or Georgia yet. They're probably the best team in that middle class of the SEC East, but definitely not unbeatable by any means.
Yeah, the game kicks off at 11 o'clock on Saturday, so it's the first morning kick for the Tigers. And Tennessee is nearly a 12-point favorite, Gabe, and I think that has more to do with the unknown about Missouri.
Yeah, and I know Missouri fans going into this game want to put this – they still want Tennessee to be South Carolina. They want Kentucky to be here too. They're putting these games in a basket of, well, these are games that we maybe shouldn't win, but definitely have a 50% chance to win. And that's not reality. I mean, like Dave said, Tennessee won 7 games in a row. And yeah, they didn't beat anybody any good, but look, Missouri in 2018, it was the same path Missouri took, just beat all the bad teams. And guess what? Missouri is one of those bad teams at the end of last year. And Tennessee is a 12-point favorite when home field advantage doesn't matter as much. So this is not a game you look at and say they have no chance. I mean, look, if this is 28-3 at halftime and they're getting beat like they did by Alabama, then we got bigger problems than you think. But by the same token, make no mistake, this would be an upset. It wouldn't be one of last week's proportions, but any Missouri fan that is looking at this schedule and going, well, Mississippi State, Kentucky, and Tennessee, like, they should win 2 of those 3. I mean, you're not looking at it realistically.
Yeah, especially after Mississippi State goes to LSU and wins last week. One more thing before we take a break, and I'll have both of you comment on this, and Dave, we'll start with you. What did you think of the game day atmosphere at Faurot Field with the reduced crowds and all the protocols in place?
Once the game kicked off, I didn't really notice it from up in the press box. I mean, you can see that the sections are kind of shut down, and you see the pods of people where they are. They had some artificial crowd noise, so it wasn't silent, but it wasn't what a normal game would be. I think the strangest scene was walking from the parking garage to the stadium, and the parking lot was just completely barren. I mean, it might as well have been like over Christmas break when the students are gone and there's nobody parked on that lot. That's what it looked like. And to the fans' credit, they, for the most part, seemed like they followed the rules and nobody was trying to be, rogue tailgaters when that's prohibited this year. So that was the strangest sight for me.
And what about you, Gabe?
Yeah, well, I'm not actually qualified to answer this because I didn't go to the game. I'm not going to games this year. Part of the, I guess, impact of all this is it changes the way we do our jobs. I mean, all the interviews were done by Zoom, which, as I'm doing right now, I can do at my house. I don't need to be in a press box at 2 a.m. to do that. So I've kind of changed our coverage, and we did have somebody there, but Mitchell Forty was there. I'm not actually at the game. So my atmosphere was I had better food, and I watched the game at my house, so better food and better drinks. And
you probably had access to a bathroom pretty easily.
I did. Yes. I did not have to wear a mask. I didn't get to see Dave. So, that was, I guess that was a strike, depending on how you look at it. But
it'll be interesting to hear Dave, because I do know Dave's going to Tennessee. It'll be interesting to see what he says about Knoxville this week. Let's take a break. When we come back, your tweets, we will have them right here on Tiger Sidelines on MC22. Everybody, this is Tiger Sidelines on MC22 alongside Gabe DeArmond and Dave Matter. I'm Bo Bayman. Thanks for joining us as always, and we appreciate your tweets. And when you tweet us, at Tigers Sidelines, and we got a couple this week. Our first one from Shannon says, and I'll send this to you there, Gabe, the Tiger defense looks to be good, but are there a couple of hidden gems that we don't know about yet that will make the D even better?
I mean, not playing Alabama is going to make the defense better. But as far as like guys playing, look, they had, I think the final number was 67 available players on Saturday. Aubrey Miller has opted out since then. There are not guys that he's not playing that he thinks can help them be better. Now, that's not say there could be guys that get better throughout the season. And a guy like Cy Martin wasn't available last week. He was injured. Maybe he ends up making an impact when he can get back. But I think the team you saw, especially on defense, those are mostly the guys you're going to see, because that's the experience side of the ball with the guys out there that they probably are a little more comfortable with and know a little more about.
And Dave, we mentioned Jarvis Ware with the injury. Have we heard anything about duration of time he'll miss?
Just day to day as of yesterday. So that's pretty much an answer that they're not going to tell us, because we're all sort of day to day at this point.
I would imagine that certainly is easier to do when you're in Zoom and you're not in front of people as well. Bob wants to know, both QBs made some nice throws. How does the more experienced player not throw the ball away and take bad sacks? What was he doing wrong at TCU before he transferred? Not trying to beat him up, but that should be second nature at this level.
Well, let's remember, he hasn't played in a game since I think October 2018. That was 2 head coaches ago. He just hasn't played much. And last year was on the scout team. That didn't count. He wasn't even running Missouri's offense. So not to say that quarterbacks get a free pass when they make a bad mistake like that. It was Alabama's defense. He took the snap. He spun around. He had 3 guys on him immediately. Sure, he's supposed to throw the ball away. That's easier said than done when you have 3 defenders on top of you at the time. He got his helmet knocked off. Not a great choice on his part. He also had like a split second to make that decision. And like Gabe said earlier, I don't think you can really get on a guy when he's trying to make a play. And that's what Sean was doing. But for the most part, and I don't think fans that were down on him gave him enough credit. He completed 76% of his passes. And a lot of those were over the middle, kind of in traffic. Some of them contested throws. His completion percentage was better than any quarterback in the SEC this week. Now, granted, he didn't win. He threw 1 touchdown. Nobody's making a statue of him, but he was better most of that game than he was on those 2 glaring mistakes.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And Gabe's point was prudent. He's trying to make plays against the number 2 team in the country. Gabe, what did you think of Connor Bazelak?
Well, Dave and I have talked about this, and I want to be clear that Connor Bazelak, by midseason, maybe he's the starting quarterback here. Maybe he's the best guy they have. But I have been stunned by the reaction I've seen since the game, which is a lot of they started the wrong guy and Bazelak needs more playing time. I mean, before the final drive, Connor Bazelak had 5 snaps. He was 2 for 4. And I've gotten a lot of, one of his passes was dropped. Well, Sean Robinson's only incomplete pass in the second half was a drop touchdown by Daniel Parker. So, I think that Bazelak is getting a lot of credit for a couple drives against a Georgia team that was ahead 27-0 last year. And let's be honest, didn't really put a lot of effort into it until Missouri got to about the 12-yard line, and then they stopped Missouri. And then for a quarter against an Arkansas team that pretty much everybody was better against than Missouri was last year. So I know that sounds like I'm ripping Connor Bazelak, and I'm not trying to. He showed some nice things. I think he has a chance. But Eli Drinkwitz quite clearly chose Sean Robinson as the starting quarterback. I don't care what the depth chart says. Before the last garbage drive, Bazelak had 5 snaps and Sean Robinson had 56. If we were in a normal year, I think Sean Robinson takes every snap. In this year, you have to have your backup with game experience in case all of a sudden on Thursday afternoon you find out your quarterback has to go into quarantine for 2 weeks. So everybody should be trying to get their backup quarterback on the field a little bit, but I think it's pretty obvious who the starter is. And Bazelak, I think maybe you feel good about the situation in that, hey, he has played and he's not going to be nervous out there and he can move the ball and all that. But I don't think there should be any sort of quarterback controversy. And actually, I think Drinkwitz, by doing what he's doing with the depth chart, is maybe doing Sean Robinson a little bit of a disservice and feeding into that a little bit.
Yeah, that could be for sure. And Dave, if Bazelak was going to be the starter, he probably could have proved it in the fall and the limited spring. But it is evident. I mean, Robinson's a guy.
Yeah, and one of the reasons they went with Robinson was because of his legs. He is a better athlete. There's no doubt about that. He just didn't get a really chance to show it against Alabama. Not many mobile quarterbacks against a good Alabama defense has a chance to show that either. So he might be able to put on a little bit more of a show, get that zone read running game, option running game more involved against a Tennessee, heck, against an LSU. They didn't look very good defensively last week. So, that is an advantage that he has, even though Bazelak is the one who had the rushing touchdown on 4th down on the last play of the game. They are two very different quarterbacks, and that could give you an advantage too. I mean, hey, if you want to put him in for a series or two where you can maybe stretch the field a little bit more vertically, then throw him out there. For all the reasons Gabe said, it could make some sense, especially to have somebody ready in case you need them full time. But yeah, again, listing them as co-starters and I don't know if this was even intentional, but they list Bazelak first and then put and then put Robinson. I think that does kind of feed into some of this grumbling you hear from the fans.
And I think we'll see Robinson start this week. Our last tweet's from Bronson. He says, are you still posting your show on YouTube? And yes, Bronson, we are. Our show airs on MC22 Friday at 6 and again Saturday morning at 9 or 10. But it does go live on our YouTube channel at 6 p.m. on Friday, so every episode will be on YouTube. And we thank you for asking the question. Don't forget, we're at Tiger Sidelines before, during, after a game. Shoot us a tweet, and you might make it on the Zoom regional cable show that we're trying to pull off here every single week. We'll take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about some other sports and some other games from the SEC. You're watching Tiger Sidelines on MC22. Welcome back, everybody. This is Tiger Sidelines, episode 2 of season 7, alongside Dave Matter and Gabe DeArmond. I'm Bo Bayman. Let's talk quickly about the rest of the SEC football action that we saw. The obvious stunner, Dave, was Mississippi State going into LSU and winning.
I thought Mike Leach's offense wouldn't work in the SEC. All it did was set records on day one at the defending national champions. That was an incredible show he put on, and that put everybody on alert that, hey, the air raid might actually work in this conference. It has before. I don't know why it wouldn't again.
Yeah, Steve Spurrier coached 30 years ago. Can we get rid of this idea that it's 1940s I formation? The SEC almost seems proud of that, and it's complete not true.
Yeah, that was an amazing performance. A couple of the other games on the slate, like Texas A&M won, but they didn't do anything convincingly. Georgia sort of ran out early. It was a kind of a typical week 1, wasn't it?
Even more so, this is why I think it was so unfortunate that Missouri got Alabama in week 1. Kirby Smart's team came out flat against a team it knew it was going to beat. Jimbo Fisher's team came out flat against a team that it knew it was going to beat. Ed Orgeron's team came out, whether it was flat or unprepared or just all the guys at one time he had are not there anymore, whatever. But Nick Saban wasn't going to let his team not be ready for week 1. I mean, yes, they probably could have won with a C effort. Nick Saban wasn't going to take a C effort. They put that game away in the second quarter. None of those other teams did that. That's the difference between, Saban and all those other coaches. I think maybe Florida and Kyle Trask put people on notice like me who thought picking Florida to win the East was dumb. Maybe it wasn't so dumb.
Yeah, they looked darn good. A couple other things. Women's soccer, by the way, opened their season, lost at South Carolina 4-1. They host Vanderbilt on Saturday in the first game here in Columbia. That'll be Saturday at 5 o'clock. Women's tennis is going to start the season on Friday. Cross country has another meet on Saturday. So things are starting to come back as we move into week 2 of football. I think everybody was glad to see week 1, and now moving on to week 2, you can concentrate a little bit more on football rather than, okay, we got to have the protocols. They're still in place, but that first time getting over that is big. So we move on to week number 2, and let's have a little talk about Texas A&M and Alabama. We just saw Alabama. Texas A&M was flat. I think the Crimson Tide, I think Eli Drinkwitz picked it right when he said they're ranked number 2 and they might be underrated.
Yeah, this team is loaded. Last year they were a little suspect defensively. They were like 20th in the nation instead of 5th, like they always are. So they looked pretty stoutly last week. I don't know how many points they can put on them, especially after they only scored 17 against Vanderbilt. Although this is going to be a year where I don't know about comparing scores from week to week. May just be silly because of everything. You don't know who's missing from teams. Like we said, with the home field advantages, is not going to be what it once was, or it usually is. But I don't see Alabama really getting slowed down until they face one of the elite teams in this league. And I'm not sure A&M is one of them. Their ranking might say they are, but I don't buy it yet.
Gabe, number 7 Auburn is at number 4 Georgia in a marquee game this week.
Yeah, that's the best game in the league. I mean, is the first half indicative of what Georgia is? They played 3 quarterbacks. I think they're searching a little bit. They got to replace a lot. And that series has produced some good ones over the years. I mean, Auburn, outside of Mississippi State, Auburn was as impressive as anybody, really kind of controlling Kentucky for the entire second half. And I think those are 2 teams that might have a claim to the second best team in the league.
And then let's talk about Missouri at number 21, Tennessee. Dave, I'll start with you. What does it take for Missouri to pull the upset, and what do you expect to happen on Saturday?
They've got to start the game like they finished it on Saturday. They just can't let a whole half go by where you're just letting the other team dominate you on both sides of the ball. And I think this will be a more evenly matched game than Saturday, obviously. But I'm still not sold enough. I just haven't seen enough from this team to be able to say, hey, they can go on the road and beat a solid Tennessee team. I think they can cover possibly, maybe through the back door like they did last week, but I'm not ready to predict a Missouri victory on the road against, a functional team yet.
Gabe, what say you?
Yeah, I mean, that pretty much covers it. 12 points is a lot. You would expect this to be a game in the second half, which last week wasn't, but they're going to have to go do this. I mean, I think there are a lot of questions on this team still, and I'm not sure we get any answers this week either.
Well, we'll see what happens. 11 o'clock kickoff, and we'll see if the Tigers can pull the upset against the Volunteers. Thanks, guys, for another week of Tiger Sidelines. For Gabe DeArmond and Dave Matter, I'm Bo Bayman. We'll see you next week. Thanks for watching Tiger Sidelines on MC22.